go. Welcome to West Virginia and Commonplace. Today I have a special guest with me. This guy has a topic that is so controversial, but tame at the same time. I have with me Jimi Fritz.
Oh, I got to turn that off. Go turn my phone off. Here you go. Yes, Jimi Fritz from Vancouver. Welcome. Hi.
And how are you doing today, sir?
Excellent, thanks. And you?
I'm doing very well. Could you let us know what happens in your world in Vancouver and why you are here today?
What happens in my world in Vancouver?
Yes.
Well, let's see now. I have a fantastic social life. I have a wonderful group of friends. I write and make music and do podcasts, and here I am.
Okay. Now tell us who Jimi Fritz is.
Jimi Fritz is the author of the recently published Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, and also another book called Rave Culture and Insider's Overview. I have a website at jimifritz.ca where you can discover all my secrets lurking.
Okay, and now your accent is that from the UK?
I'm from England originally. Yeah, I was born and grew up in the UK, and I left there permanently when I was about 20, 23, 24, something like that.
Okay, so you've been pretty well versed in culture and everywhere around the world. So here's the major thing. You just told us the title of your book, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. Please break down the terminology for ethical drug dealer.
Well, an ethical drug dealer is, first of all, that somebody that deals in ethical drugs or drugs that improve and enhance the quality of your life. And that would include the psychedelics. I'm talking about LSD and DMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca, mescaline, drugs like this. These drugs actually, improve your, expand your consciousness. They improve the quality of your life. They're non-addictive. And I've always disseminated them to responsible adults. So that's the ethical part. I've never had anything to do with opiates or coke or crack or crystal or speed or any of these other, and they all tend to get lumped into the same category. And that's one of the goals of this book, is to show that, psychedelics in particular are a different class of drugs. They're not dangerous. They're not addictive. You can get a lot out of them. There's a massive amount of research going on right now into psychedelics, and they seem to be, you're being used for depression and anxiety and all these others. So there are many, many therapeutic uses for these non-addictive substances. And we need to put them in their place and put them in a different class to the more harmful and addictive drugs. And that was one of the goals, because I've been using psychedelics for 50 years and I've never had a problem. And almost everybody I've ever known has been a psychedelic drug user with almost no problems whatsoever. The other class of drugs, the addictive street drugs, are a completely different world, and one that I've never been involved in. So that was one of the overarching themes of the book, is that psychedelics, normal people, most of the people that I saw, I'm an ex-drug dealer, I should point out, but most of the people that I dealt with over the years were responsible people. They were professionals. They were doctors and lawyers and, government workers and all kinds of professionals. So these were not people that were reckless or using drugs irresponsibly. They were using them to enhance and improve the quality of their lives, and that's what they did. So that it's a point that doesn't get out that often. There's a Columbia professor called Carl, what's his name? Oh, I forget. Carl somebody or other. Anyway, he just wrote a book about the responsible use of drugs for adults. And he's confessed to using, and he uses cocaine, he uses heroin, and he uses a lot of drugs, but he uses them, and I maintain too in my book that any drug can be used responsibly. It's just that you got to be a lot more responsible with some of them than others. But psychedelics in particular are relatively safe and harmless and possibly very beneficial.
All right, so I have a question, because I deal with a lot of people that have these two things, depression and anxiety. how can psychedelics help people that are depressed or have anxiety?
Well, anxiety is anxiety and depression. They're both the kind of they're both where your brain gets stuck. It gets stuck in a rut, and you can't break out of it. You get stuck in this cycle of thinking, and you can't break out of it. You can't see outside of that. What psychedelics do is they rewire your brain in a different way. And now all of a sudden you can see, you get an objective perspective. You can actually see yourself from the outside in and in a new way. And it creates a new way of thinking, which breaks you out of this destructive cyclic, destructive cycle of thinking, which is what depression and anxiety really are. You're stuck on this one thing. It's like a compulsion and you can't get out of it. Psychedelics rewire your brain. They change the way you think. And once you think differently, you can approach your problems differently and see them more clearly. And it's very, very effective for those things. There's probably 100 studies going on right now around the world with psilocybin, with LSD, with ibogaine, and they're all being used for depression, anxiety, end of life issues, and they're getting great results. MDMA, for instance, will be a prescription medication for PTSD probably within the next year. It's been,
Oh, wow.
it's been studied for 25 years now. There's an organization called MAPS run by a guy called Rick Doblin, who's been working on getting MDMA as a prescription drug for PTSD for 25 years now. And it's just coming into the third stage studies. The FDA have just recently given it a special designation of a substance with exceptional potential. So they've catapulted it to the front of the line. And with all these vets coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and everywhere else with PTSD, nothing is working for these guys. A lot of them are committing suicide. They don't know what to do. Well, they're curing people of PTSD with 2 or 3 sessions with MDMA, also known as ecstasy. So it's very, very effective. And, therapists are very excited about it because they can actually do something for their patients.
And I thank you for all that wealth of knowledge, because knowing that now, and knowing, like, I deal with so many people that deal with these things in life, it'll be a way, like you said, to take away that compulsion in their life and rewire them. So I greatly appreciate you for that knowledge, and I'm glad to know about that study. Now let's dive a little bit into you real quick. So 50 years with psychedelics. How did you go about your life, like maintaining and never overdosing on any of these psychedelics?
Well, you just don't take too much. To avoid overdosing, you take the correct dose. And it's a good point, because it's very, very dose specific. Like the difference between, 30 micrograms of LSD and 300 micrograms of LSD is huge. So you have to know your dosage, you have to know your frequency, you have to understand what these drugs do, and you have to use them respectfully and responsibly. And if you do that, there are great benefits to be had. Anything you do irresponsibly is going to be a problem, right? So if you do too much of anything, it's like the difference. You can have a glass of wine with dinner and it's no problem, right? Or you can drink a 40-pounder for breakfast, and that's going to be a major issue. The only difference there is dosage. It's the same drug.
Okay. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Just watch how you're doing it. And with illicit things, obviously you don't have a prescribed method on how to use it, so those lead to overdoses. So one thing I want you to elaborate on: smart drugs and dumb drugs. Over on your website and throughout your book, there's certain terminologies, and this is one I definitely would like to talk about, because I like those phrases: a smart drug and a dumb drug.
Yeah, so it's a kind of, my book opens up with a kind of a treatise on smart drugs and dumb drugs. And smart drugs are the ones that increase your perception and awareness of the world, and therefore improve and enhance the quality of your life. Dumb drugs are the ones that decrease your perception and awareness, and therefore take down the quality of your life. So a lot of people do the dumb drugs, and I'm talking about the addictive ones like coke and crack and opiates and fentanyl and all these things. People do those drugs for completely different reasons. They do them to get out of it. You do psychedelics to get into it. and it's a completely opposite motivation and application. So the dumb drugs make you dumb, and the smart drugs make you smart. And if you do smart drugs for long enough, you can become even smarter. If you're doing dumb drugs, then and you do smart drugs, then you can end up being a smart person doing smart drugs. If you're a smart person that starts doing dumb drugs, then you end up being a dumb person doing dumb drugs.
Okay, I like that. Now, you have numerous titles to your name. You're a musician. Bring us into light when you decided to become a musician, or how it started in your childhood that you wanted to get into music, and tell us about the highs and lows. Because the amazing thing with you is you have 50 years experience across the board doing everything. So you have a vast knowledge of technology in its infancy all the way until now.
Right, right. So when I mean, I was hitchhiking around Europe as a teenager, and you know, needed to make money, and I did fruit picking and other things, but ran into a guy in a campsite who taught me 3 chords on a guitar, and I learned 3 songs, and then I was, you know, playing in the streets of Rome 3 days later and making money. So that was a revelation, because then I bought a guitar, and I used that as an income for the next you know, 3 or 4 years, hitchhiking around in different countries, and could make a living wherever I was. So that's how I started. And then I got, you know, a bit more sophisticated, learned a lot more. I was a professional musician for a number of years in duos and trios and a 5-piece jazz band. And after that, I wrote songs. I've written a lot of songs. I've got 5 albums on my website you can download for free. That's jimifritz.ca. And recently, in the last few years, I've been making music videos, because I was also a filmmaker for many years. And so
yeah, that's another one I wanted to dive into.
I brought my you know, music skills and filmmaking skills together, and made 24 music videos of my original songs, which are also on jimifritz.ca, and a YouTube channel under the name Jimi Fritz, Jimi Fritz. And yeah, it's been greatly fulfilling. I don't do it professionally anymore, because it's the type of music that I play is kind of personal music. It's acoustic music. It's kind of jazz ballads and folk ballads. So there isn't really much of a commercial application for it, but I really enjoy doing it. And I still play music every day, and will continue till I drop dead.
Okay. Now, with the filmmaking, making music videos, so going from being the person that creates music to becoming basically a cinematographer, because you have to have a certain eye for when you shoot video, because anybody nowadays just points a camera and can shoot a video, but it takes a little bit of art doing that. So how did you come along with your filmmaking? Like, what was the first mistake you made, and how further along did you get more advanced with it, and get to a point where you knew, man, I'm good at what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, I've always been fascinated with film. I've been a film buff for a long time, and was fascinated with world cinema and independent cinema and auteur cinema. So I was a big fan for a long time, and then I had a feeling to make some films. So I went to film school, and after film school, I made a TV show. I made 18 half-hour shows called Alternating Currents, which was exploring the soft eccentric underbelly of the Vancouver art scene. So that was quite popular and a lot of fun and a great training ground. Then I made promotionals and videos and some educational videos. I went into documentaries. Made a 1-hour documentary in a prison about a theater company. It's called Theater Behind Bars. It's also on my website, jimifritz.ca. And it's a 1-hour documentary with all these prisoners that got together and made a theater show. So we follow the process from conception to curtain over a period of about 8 months. It was really interesting to go to the prison, you know, on and off for 8 months and get to know all these guys. And they got a lot out of the theater program, because it gave them kind of self-confidence and self-esteem and whatnot. And they sort of found themselves through the program. And it was an autonomous program within the prison, so it funded itself. They brought in people from the outside. So that was an interesting project. And then I started writing screenplays. I wrote 2 feature-length screenplays and got very close to making one of them. That fell apart at the end. But filmmaking is a very, very expensive. It's very, very time consuming. You've got to, you know, it takes it takes a year to finance it, a year to make it. It's just years of your life. So that's when I started writing, because I got involved with rave culture. I became a rave promoter. And I was very impressed with that whole scene. So I wrote a book called Rave Culture, An Insider's Overview. And that came about because I tried to make the documentary. I put together a proposal for a documentary on rave, and I was going to travel around the world and interview all the main players. And that got...
Let's take a minute real fast for our sponsor. If you have a business, you need a website. What's the best way to get a website up and running? Choose a website hosting company that makes it simple, like Pair Networks. Pair has over 20 years of experience managing the entire digital ecosystem for thousands of online businesses all around the world. Pair makes it easy for you with do-it-yourself website building tools and features, including simple drag-and-drop page design, and they have guaranteed US-based support technicians ready to help you whenever you need it, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Right now, when you sign up with Pair Networks, you'll receive 1 free month of web hosting. See for yourself how easy it is to build your website for free. Visit pair.com/free to get your first month of website hosting for free by using the code QUICKSTART. That's pair.com/promo code QUICKSTART to get started today.
Got turned down by every production company in the world. And so I thought, well, I'll write the book. So I did. I wrote the Rave Culture, An Insider's Overview, and found that very liberating, because with a book, you can do what you want. You can do when you want it. You can do as much or as little as you want. You don't need anybody else's opinion or input. So that led me to writing. So one thing kind of led to another, right?
Right. So you go from making music to filmmaker to an author. Now, let me ask you this, because I always like to get an author's perspective on writing, because I actually wrote a book myself. So I know some ins and outs. Was there ever a point when you were doing these books about raves that you like got a writer's block, or did something stop you somewhere from writing at certain periods?
No, I've never had a writing block. I've never, I hear about it all the time, but no, if I've got something to say, then I just, I can say it. This book took about 8 months to write, and was pretty much straight the way through. I just started it, but it's was also, I didn't have to make anything up, because it's, I call it a psychedelic travelogue and memoir, a geographical and psychological journey, 50-year journey. So basically, I just mapped out all the events that I was going to describe, and then I edited that, because there was, 10 times more than I could ever put in the book. And so I just kind of hit the high points, and then I just went down the list, and each item on the list was a chapter. And I didn't. I never had writer's block.
Okay. Now, after you write your first book, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer is your second book.
Yeah.
What day and what time did you decide that, hey, I need to put this book out there? I need to shed light on this so that people could understand? Because from what you said, when I hear psychedelics, I already have stigmas and misconceptions already in my head, because I'm thinking back into I'm an 80s baby, so I'm thinking back to Woodstock. I'm thinking about to whatever happened at Studio 54 in the 70s, all that kind of stuff that led up to the early 80s. So what made you decide that it was just the right time to write this book at this moment?
Well, because I'm going to be dead in about 10 or 15 years. So I thought if I don't do it now, I won't do it. Plus, it's a long, 50 years is a nice amount of time. And it was something that was in my mind, for a long time, to just document this part of my life, because the traveling, I've done a lot of traveling in a lot of different countries, and then the psychedelic overlay on top of that. It just seemed like I just wanted to tell that story, because even people that I know today that I've known for years don't know half of the stories in this book. You can't just sit around narrating your own story in public.
So true.
It was just a chance to document that and to put it aside. So that was the motivation, and also because there's a lot of talk about psychedelics right now. We're on the verge of a psychotherapy psychedelic revolution. They're being decriminalized and legalized all over the world now, and I think in 10 or 15 years' time they'll be available, certainly as prescription drugs, and probably eventually recreationally as well. So you know, I thought that was a good time to do it.
Okay. Now you lived a very, very long life. So living a long life, you have wisdom, experience. But could you tell us about a time of great triumph in your life? And then after that, could you tell us about a great disappointment that happened? Because like in my lifetime, I can always say that I was able to entertain. I was on TV at some point. I wrote a book. I'm doing what we call the new radio. I've lived all the entertainment experience that I'll ever need. But the one downfall that I have is that I didn't take the time to go to college and learn the behind the scenes, like engineering and stuff like that for radio and stuff. And I wish I had. That's my biggest disappointment in life. So, what about you? What's your greatest triumph in your disappointment?
I've had so many high points that you know, I mean, a lot of them are listed in this new book. Lots of peak experiences, you know, lots of amazing places and lots of amazing people. So there's just so many. And one of the problems with what to put in the book was really the biggest problem was what to leave out, because there are so many experiences and places and people. I was on the road for 20 years and lived in a lot of different countries, and so the biggest problem was what to leave out. So there's just so many high points. And most of my life, I mean, I've had pretty much a charmed existence. I've had a lot of good luck. I've never been in any desperate situations. I've never had any catastrophes or calamities. So mostly a charmed life. And I don't really regret anything. I wouldn't change anything in my life looking back. I don't see any place where I would say, no, I shouldn't have done that, or I regret that, or that was a bad move, or everything seems to have worked out, you know. So no real low points either. I mean, no catastrophes or disasters. I know quite a few people that are dying right now because I'm of an age where, you know, my friends are, you know, getting sick and dropping dead. But, you know, that's part of life too. I mean, it's not, I don't think of death as a catastrophe anymore.
Okay. And I guess when you get to a certain age, or just in a certain realm, not age, get to a certain realm in life, you get that way. Now, on this show, I pay homage to a news magazine called 2020. In the United States, growing up, there was John Stossel, there was Diane Sawyer, and then there was probably the greatest journalist, she's still alive, Barbara Walters. And I ask certain detailed questions to whoever comes on the show just to get them to be more personable and to learn a little bit more about them. So, Jimi, it's your turn now. You're on the hot seat. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, now here we go. Now, when we talk about psychedelic drugs and we talk about the stigmas, the misconceptions, what is the worst misconception that you come upon when you're explaining this to someone that is naive to psychedelic drugs?
I think the biggest barrier is that people put all drugs in the same category. They think of drugs and they think of the drug addict on the street and the people overdosing on the streets and drug addicts and rehab. And that's what they think about. Now, when I think about psychedelics, I think about, you know, creativity and mind expansion and enhancement of life and all those things. So that's a big problem, is people put all drugs into the same category and they don't realize, you know, they don't know the difference between a magic mushroom and a flap of crack. So this is a major problem, right? It's a major problem with law enforcement too. I mean, even today, they don't know the difference between, consciousness expanding drugs and mind numbing drugs. So there's a huge difference. So we need to separate those out. That's probably the biggest mistake that people make, is they put all drugs in the same category and they think they're all addictive and harmful, and that's not true.
Okay.
The guy's name, I remember the guy's name, his name's Carl Hart.
Carl Hart.
Carl Hart, he's sort of on the vanguard now of promoting, you know, the fact that any drug can be used responsibly. And you know, he's a professor of psychology at Columbia University. And you know, on the weekend sometimes he'll do a little bit of heroin, or if he's at a party, he'll do a line of coke. You know, he'll have a joint when he feels like it. but he does it responsibly, and he does it in a way that it fits with, he has kids, he has responsibilities, he has a professional career, and it doesn't affect any of those things. In fact, he says that it enhances his performance, it enhances his sense of well-being. And I think that's, I think that case needs to be made. And I make that case in my book too. And that's probably the biggest misconception, that people think that all drugs are harmful and addictive, and it's far from the truth.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that, because, like you said, a drug that helps you become more conscious instead of a drug that mind numbs you, I can see a difference there. And inside that, I definitely, I'm very open, to people that use drugs and whatever they do with their drugs. But like you said, a certain type of a level of responsibility with the drugs gives that accountability that, hey, you do have this under control. And I always had that respect for people, because I'm like, hey, if you have this under control, it's good. It's when they slip, because a mind-numbing drug, like you said, can still be in the same sense of another drug if it's used responsibly. So here's my next question. When a person that does mind-numbing drugs comes to you and they want to reevaluate and change the way they use drugs, how do you help them?
Well, I mean, that's one of the uses that they're using psilocybin. They're using them as transitional drugs. They're using psychedelics as transitional drugs for opiate addicts and, amphetamine addicts and coke addicts. And they're using them to transition them away from those addictive drugs, so they can be used in that way, which is pretty interesting. There's a pilot project going on in Vancouver now where they're trying to transition addicts through magic mushrooms, psilocybin. And because it changes the way they think. It changes the way they think of themselves and the way they see themselves in the world. And that's the problem, because people are doing these harmful drugs because they have horrible lives and horrible backgrounds and trauma, psychological trauma, and they're trying to mask it. They're trying to obliterate their minds because they don't like what's going on in their mind. So they're using it as an escape from their problems, whereas psychedelics send you in the other direction. You embrace your problems, or you see them in a different way. You see them with different eyes and a clarity for the first time sometimes, and it can be life-changing. I've seen people turn their lives around with psychedelics. There's a lot of microdosing going on right now. A lot of people are using microdoses of acid and LSD and psilocybin for depression and anxiety, because it just brightens their day. It cheers them up. It makes them think more clearly. And if you do a microdose, you don't even get high. I mean, the idea is that you don't get you don't hallucinate or anything. You don't get high. You don't feel any different, but it changes your brain on a subtle level. It increases the neural nets and the neural pathways, and literally expands your consciousness physically and metaphorically.
Okay. And I thank you for that, because that right there, that's the gem in this episode. That right there will turn a lot of heads, and it will make people a little bit more rounded, in my opinion.
Hopefully.
Hopefully of the different uses and how to approach and accept people on either side of the fence, or who are not on the fence at all with any of this. So now here goes the hard question. This is the Barbara Walters question. This is the deep one. Okay. In your lifetime, you've helped people along the way, and we never disclose any information about anybody personal to us or anything like that. But have you ever seen a time that the psychedelic use turned into a bad use for people?
Yeah, I mean, people can have bad trips. In fact, in my new book, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer by Jimi Fritz, available at fine bookstores everywhere, I describe my first. I've only ever had one bad experience on psychedelics, and I was 15 years old, and it's the first time I ever did a psychedelic. I did a huge dose of LSD, which was a purple microdose. It's about 350 micrograms. I'd never heard of LSD before. I didn't know what it did. I had no idea what I was doing. I did it with a bunch of other people who didn't know anything about it. And that's an example of misuse, you know, and I put that in the book early on because that was to make the point that if you don't take them seriously, you can have a bad trip. And but you can only have a bad trip if you do it in the wrong set and setting. And that was something that Leary, you know, Timothy Leary espoused for years and years. You know, you have to, the set is your frame of mind, the setting is your environment, and dosage and frequency. So if you have those things correct, you never have a bad trip. If you do too much in the wrong place, if you take a couple of hits of acid and go see a horror movie, you're likely to have a bad trip. Or if you're doing them under experimental conditions. They were doing experiments in the 60s where they tie people to the bed. They'd strap them down, give them massive doses of LSD, and then stand around the bed with white coats and clipboards. And these people were totally freaked out. So
they were wigging out, yes.
That's an example of a very bad set and setting. So if you get those things wrong, you can have a bad trip, and it'll bring up whatever's there. Also, you know, it's an important point that psychedelics don't put anything in your mind that isn't already there. They just amplify what's there. They're amplifiers. So if you're, if you're troubled and depressed and anxious and paranoid, and you take a big hit, of LSD, you can have a bad trip. If you take a moderate dose and go for a nice, pleasant walk in the woods with your friends, you'll have a fantastic time. So, it's you have to know what you're doing, and it's there's a lot of good information out there. There's no excuse for people making these mistakes anymore, but of course people do. But yeah, the bad experience comes from misuse and misuse or abuse. If you use them responsibly and respectfully, you don't have those problems. So that's what we need to do, and that's what we need to be teaching young people, is how to use these drugs responsibly and effectively to enhance their lives, instead of just gobbling everything in sight and seeing what happens.
And I can agree with that, because like growing up in I'm from the state of Virginia. We got a little country area, so we had shrooms, and no one told us what to do with them. They said, if you get the shrooms, you're going to get high. You're going to wig out. And then we had little and I don't shy away from this. Everybody at some point had a little acid here or there. I don't care. They can sit there and lie or say what they want. And with the acid, we were the little drops and different things. We were taught, like, you can try this, but be in a safe place. You're not going to go just do acid, like you said, and go to a concert and wig out or nothing like that. Because like you said, I play video games. So I was playing GoldenEye, and I had a bad trip off GoldenEye, and I put the Nintendo 64 down, never played it again. So I wholeheartedly understand what you're saying about like the setting and how things should properly be done when you're using something like that. So I want to thank you very much for coming on the show and enlightening us on this. But here's my major question. This is the last part of the 2020 segment. If there was a billboard that was in Vancouver, British Columbia, there was another billboard in Seattle, Washington, maybe one more in Everett, Washington, just because I like the name of Everett, and then maybe one more in Portland, Oregon, what would all these billboards say about Jimi Fritz?
They'd say you should really read his new book, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer.
And one thing that I want to tell you that I really appreciate you doing, there's a part of the show we call the shameless plug.
Yeah,
and
I think I already did that.
yes, you were very intricate and you pulled it off. So I want to thank you very much. So Jimi Fritz, in closing, I would like to get you to do this for the audience real fast. Please tell the audience which book they should read first, then just briefly, a quick moment, tell them about the highlights in both books. Not to give away too much.
All right, well, the new one is Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer by Jimi Fritz. And it's a 50-year journey, psychological and a geographical journey through life. Call it a psychedelic travelogue and memoir. It's intertwined, so the geographical travel is kind of intertwined with the psychedelic experiences. And it's really just to let people know that psychedelics can be a healthy part of a healthy life. The other one is Rave Culture and Insider's Overview, which is a primer for the global rave phenomenon. It's kind of a snapshot. It's fairly old right now, and some of it's out of date. But if you're interested in rave culture, it'll give you the history and the history of the music, the history of the culture, the philosophy of the culture. And there's a lot of stuff about MDMA in there. And so that's a useful one if you're interested in rave culture. And they can both be found on my website at jimifritz.ca, YouTube channel under Jimi Fritz, Jimi Fritz. And there's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of films there, movies, writing, podcasts, and it's really a center for all your entertainment needs.
Now, what I do on this show is I like to give everybody a quick testament of who they are and who presuming you to be. So let me tell you real quick, Jimi Fritz. There's one thing that's remarkable about you. It's this word we use, fortitude. Not a lot of people have fortitude. A lot of people have this strong will to be brave, but you got fortitude here. You're pushing the envelope here to be able to talk about the topic you're talking about and to not be unabashed or anything like that. For the simple fact, like, you've been through it, you tripped one time, and to do that for 50 years and to be on both sides of not drug dealing, but both sides of seeing both things of the smart drugs and the dumb drugs. I commend you for that. It takes a lot to get out here and to express openly in a nice fashion about drug use. Because the first thing that's slapped in the world is a negative connotation on anyone that uses a drug, from the person that does psychedelics to the person that does weed to the person that uses fentanyl to the person that uses other type of opiates. And you are being very conscious and speaking to and allowing these people to understand that there is a responsible way you can do this with any drug to a degree. Not every drug, but we'll say any drug, just for argument's sake. And that's exceptional. There's nobody else in the world that's doing that right now, because everyone has a stance. Either you do drugs and all drugs are fine, or no, drugs are bad, stay away from drugs. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for being that person that's not in the middle, that person that's not trying to crusade in a sense that doesn't make sense. Your crusade makes sense.
Right,
use drugs responsibly. Use drugs responsibly, and you won't have any issues. And the point of taking psychedelic drugs and explaining that not all psychedelic drugs fit into the presence of amphetamines or any of the opiates and stuff like that. Those are totally different drugs from what you are trying to explain to people, and the thought of what makes your conscience go forward and what makes your conscience go backwards. That right there was the gem in this episode, because like you said, knowing these two entities makes it a whole lot easier and an easier way to explain things to the audience and to people when you're expressing all your views. So, Jimi Fritz, I would like to tell you thank you for your service today.
All right.
And this has been a great episode here, West Virginia Commonplace, and we're signing off.
Okay. Bye-bye from Vancouver. All the best. Peace.